Are you interested in adopting a rescue dog? Well, in this video, I'm going to be breaking down some of your top things to consider before going to the shelter, the rescue, the foster home, and picking out your pup. Let's get into it. What's up, guys? It's Jenna with Dog Liaison, where I coach you on how to enhance your dog's mental health. I'm a professional dog trainer, and on this channel, we focus on enhancing our dog's mental health and recovering their perspectives of the world. Many of the dogs I work with have anxiety disorders in my Recovering Rover program. We focus primarily on dogs facing multiple anxiety disorders at once, and many of the dogs in the RRP were actually rescues, and their guardians did not expect that their dogs would have anxiety when they brought their little pup home from the shelter. So in this video, I really want to look at some of the things to consider apart from just possibility of anxiety disorders when you're bringing your dog home. Let's get into it. Now, the first thing to consider is that when you see a dog at the shelter or in the foster home, you are not getting that dog's most authentic self necessarily. So for example, if you are in your home with your partner and your family, you have a trusting relationship with them. They may know your most authentic self, right? Because it's a safe environment and you're very well acquainted with everyone in it. But when you go into a professional environment where perhaps you have acquaintances and there's reasonable trust, but there's not necessarily a connection, it's very superficial, you're gonna behave a little bit differently. They're not gonna see your most authentic self, they're gonna see a more suppressed version of you. This is a very normal human condition, there's nothing unusual about that. But humans are animals, and we know that animals change their behavior according to their trust and their comfort as well. So your dog is going to behave differently in an environment where there's less familiarity, less confidence than he will when you actually take him home and he's starting to open up and he's starting to be more trusting. Now, how fast a dog adapts and becomes their normal authentic self is really dependent on the individual. I say at minimum 3 days. So at minimum 72 hours before a dog really starts to be like, oh, okay, this is a new routine. But honestly, we hear just anecdotally that people may not see their most authentic dog for a whole month, a whole 2 months, a whole year. And there can be a number of reasons why that is. Sometimes it's just a matter of the person needs more bond with that dog. But in many cases, it's because that dog has been in depression. That dog has had perhaps some sort of anxiety disorder. That can take a while to get back to normal, right? The dog needs a significant amount of enrichment, routine, and structure before they can trust that this human is going to take care of them and that they don't necessarily need to fend for themselves. Yes, we talk about rescue dogs being less trusting because they've come from home to home and perhaps they haven't had these same opportunities to foster strong relationships, especially older rescue dogs. That's true. And so really what that means is that you have to anticipate that not only are you not seeing that dog's authentic self in the shelter, but that you may not see that dog's authentic behavioral responses until a whole year after adopting, depending on the dog and depending on that dog's anxiety disorders and history and personality. Now, earlier I was talking about how a dog may need predictability and structure and routine, and it might be easy for you to say, well, that means the dog needs obedience. But obedience and routine are not the same thing. Obedience can be put in a routine. Obedience can be put in a methodical chain that implements a routine, but a routine can happen independent of a sit. A routine can happen independent of a down. So having predictability to a predictable positive outcome. That's how you have to think about this, is that the dog needs to not just be able to see what's going to happen to them, but is going to be able to see that what's going to happen to them is good and safe and something that they like. Now, the other important part is you want to consider the dog's genetics and DNA. I know that dog culture wants to say that pretty much all dogs are the same. That could not be further from the truth. There are something like 360 breeds or something. And then you add in the component of mixes, and some mixes literally have like 15 different breeds in them. Like, you add in these components and pretty soon, my friend, you do not have a one-size-fits-all approach for every single dog. So if you have a rescue and you truly don't know what the dog's breed is, especially if you look at it and you're like, I don't know, man, it could be everything. Please, please, please get a DNA test. Please, please, please find out what that dog's DNA markers are as soon as possible, because it's going to help you understand your dog and what to expect behaviorally from them. You may be thinking that you're working with a hound and you find out that no, actually you're working with a sporting breed. Hounds and sporting breeds are going to behave differently, and most importantly, they're gonna have different enrichment needs. For example, I had a dog who, it was a little puppy, and I could have sworn up and down that this was a little mini Rottweiler, okay? It looked exactly like if you take a Rottweiler and then you put it in a little Pomeranian size body. That's what this dog looked like, right? So I was like, I don't know how they got this dog, but that's what she looks like. And I kid you not, we got that DNA test back from them. And the dog, first of all, had no Rottweiler whatsoever. The dog had a Beagle in him, he had a Chihuahua, and he had a bunch of other things in him. Absolutely not a Rottweiler by any stretch. So a lot of times we look at the dog, we go, oh, I think we know what this is. And then we find out through the DNA test that he is completely opposite of that. I had another dog in the RP who we thought he was a little Doxy. No Dachshund in him whatsoever. Looks just like a Doxy, absolutely zero Doxy. He had miniature poodle and some other things. So knowing what your dog's breed is directly going to influence what their enrichment needs are. It's going to influence their play strategy. It's going to influence how you interact with them, what personality traits they're going to have, how they perceive the world. It is absolutely critical that you understand your dog from an internal perspective and don't just outright assume that you know them just because all dogs are the same. Now, it's also important that you remember that there is a statistical correlation between rescue dogs, adopted dogs, and separation anxiety. That's just statistics, okay? Very often dogs that have separation anxiety were rescued. Perhaps they have an abandonment history where they were abandoned. So it's very important that when you bring your rescue dog home, you are okay with them having separation anxiety. Doesn't mean that the dog will have separation anxiety, but when you bring that dog home, you need to acknowledge that that is a very real possibility. And my friends, separation anxiety is an anxiety disorder. So this is not something that you just like teach the dog sit and it's all over. If a dog has clinical separation anxiety, that is at minimum a 3-month recovery journey. But more often than not, I see it a 6-month, year-long, 2-year-long recovery journey if the dog has clinical separation anxiety. And I'm not talking about other separation related problems. So it's very important that if you're bringing home a rescue dog, just accept that that could be a very real possibility, and are you committed to treating that anxiety disorder if your dog should have it? Do you have the time, energy, the financial capacity, literally just the emotional energy required to treat an anxiety disorder in a dog? Many of our rescue dogs are sound sensitive, they are shy, they're less likely to trust the environment around them. And this can be for a number of reasons. Very often it has nothing to do with past abuse. Sometimes obviously it has something to do with trauma in the past, but many times it has nothing to do with that and has everything to do with they just haven't had the proper exposure and socialization at the critical socialization periods in their life. They were not given the same learning opportunities when it was necessary for them to learn that another dog who came home at 8 weeks old is going to have. So are you okay and are you committed to that dog's recovery if they should have some fear, sensitivity, hyperarousal, or other anxiety related problems? And right now you might be thinking, oh, well, don't worry, Jenna, because if I get a fearful dog, I'm sure the shelter will tell me. I'm sure that the foster home will tell me that the dog is sensitive. Again, this goes back to suppressed behavior. Sometimes you're not seeing that dog's authentic behavioral responses. And while that fear and those phobias are probably there, you may not be seeing them externally because the behavior is being suppressed and depressed. You really need to be open-minded and be okay with finding out that the dog that you brought home is completely different than the dog you thought you were bringing home at the shelter. Sometimes we think to ourselves like, oh, I've got to bring the dog home because if I don't, someone else will. But I don't personally believe bringing a dog home is an hour-long decision. I mean, no one spends an hour to decide to have a baby or to adopt a baby. This is a much longer decision than just finding a dog on the internet and saying, he looks cute, let's bring him home. Really think about the requirements and the enrichment needs of that dog, and are you able to meet all of them? Now, if you have a second dog currently in home and you're looking to bring in another pup, then you're gonna wanna check out this video that I did last week where I really talk about the dynamics of bringing in a second dog. And if you're interested in learning more, make sure you subscribe to my channel, which is all about dog behavior and science. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next video.